The female lead tells women's stories. Remarkable, diverse, inspiring. An educational charity promoting positive female role models who show the many different routes to success and fulfillment.
So often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect, and it'll be messy, and it'll be hard. But you're doing something, and you're on your way.
Empowering future generations of women through films and a book of 60 women donated to 18,000 schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. And through our female lead societies, we help girls to discover new role models that speak to their passions, ambitions and careers. Through our research into social media and mental health, we found a solution to the negative impact of social media on teen girls. Through a simple intervention which encouraged girls to follow different influencers, we were able to change their entire social media experience and sense of well-being. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people on social, with 330 million impressions all over the globe. So what's next? As well as inspiring girls, we're now finding ways to measurably improve the lives of older women through data, research, and the stories of those who have overcome challenges and found their own personal versions of success. We're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Female Lead Live. I'm here with the fantastic Niven Postma. Hello, Niven. Today, we're going to be looking at a guide that is all about how to navigate office politics. I'm Edwina Dunn. I'm founder of the Female Lead, a charity which showcases amazing, diverse women who are shaping the world today. Now, I think we know that most people try to avoid office politics. I think we talk about it generally as it's unpleasant, rather distasteful, a bit unethical, and really a very unnecessary distraction from real work. Well, we're going to learn that quite to the contrary, removing yourself from office politics can be dangerous. And that you can play well, and you can play without sacrificing your principles. So I think, Niven, you're going to take us through some pretty important elements, which is what are office politics, why we never actually ever escape them, but the fact that there are some myths and that actually we can be savvy and embrace them in a very ethical and positive way. So that's what we're going to learn today. And I think you're going to guide us through that. So just a few words before I hand over to you, just a few words on your career, which obviously you know about, but our audience doesn't. You are now managing director of your own company, Postma Incorporated. But over the years and over your career, you've worked in the private, public and not-for-profit sectors. Mm-hmm. And you've worked all over the world, Australia, Scandinavia, Germany, the UK, UAE. You lecture in Henley Business School, and you also have a best-selling book, which is all about said guide to navigating office politics. So wonderful background, and we're very, very happy to have you. And I believe you're in Johannesburg as we speak. So welcome.
Thank you, Edwina. It's just lovely to be here.
Great. Well, I get you for the first few questions, and then our very energetic and enthusiastic audience that's out there will send some questions in, I have no doubt, and I'll give you a little nudge as we get close to that time. So if I may, let me ask a couple of questions just to set this up. I've kind of set the background, but is playing office politics something for us to be ashamed about?
Yeah, well, no, in an answer, depending on how you play it and to what intent. But, you know, one of the widest spread myths around office politics is this idea that you can either be a decent human being or you can play politics. And often when I give a lecture, the first thing that I do, just to get a sense of the people in the room, is to do a word cloud on Mentimeter. So I ask people, you know, choose up to 3 words that describe office politics. And slowly the word cloud forms, and it's uniformly negative, pejorative. I mean, the words that come up increasingly more in the last little while are toxic, distasteful, cruel, unsettling, unnecessary. So this whole picture forms of a very widespread myth that office politics are by definition revolting things, and therefore, obviously, you know, if you engage in them, you too are pretty revolting. And that's simply not the case. In fact, you know, far from being ashamed of engaging in office politics, quite the opposite. People are incredibly proud of the fact that they don't engage in office politics. It's like this badge of honor that they shine up, myself included, for way too long in my career. And it's a big mistake. It really is.
So if that's the case, then how do we reframe something that, you know, is spoken of derogatorily in a way that becomes something positive?
Yeah. Well, so that's often the very first thing I've got to get right in lectures. And it's certainly the first thing I try to get right in the book is, can we all make sure that we're speaking about, first of all, the same thing, and then second of all, the right same thing? And actually, for most people, the definition of office politics is completely wrong. So this toxic, unnecessary mess that people avoid, you know, at all costs. No, those are bad politics, the kind of Machiavellian, underhanded, exploitative things that we've all seen at some stage in our career. And heaven forbid we escape them, we won't. We will see more of them in our career. But that's the bad version of politics. The actual definition of politics is completely neutral. And it's about the informal, unofficial, sometimes behind the scenes efforts that we all engage in all organizations, either to get things done, to increase our power, to increase our standing. And so informal, unofficial, behind the scenes, I mean, those are neutral. Of course, you can have the bad politics, but you can also, by definition, have good politics. And often what surprises people is when I ask them to think about somebody that they really admire. And okay, they've got that person in their mind. And I ask them, can you think of times when that person engaged in informal, unofficial, influencing, stakeholder management, lobbying to get things done? And suddenly the light bulb kind of comes on over their head because, yeah, actually I can. I certainly can. And then it's the realization, well, they were playing politics because they were doing these kinds of things. But because you admired them and because you liked them, you didn't call it politics. It was politics, just coming in a different way, in a different guise from somebody you respected.
So can we swap the word politics to the word influence, maybe?
Yeah. So often, Edwina, that's what I say to people, because I can see them getting what I'm saying. But the idea of politics only being negative is so hardwired in their brains, in our brains sometimes, that as much as they try and as hard as they try, they just can't get past this idea, no, but it's politics and that's horrible. So I say, well, then call it whatever you want. Who cares what the name is? But because basically politics just boils down to 4 things, right? So the first thing is absolutely influence. The second one is relationships. The third is power. And the fourth is the perceptions that people have of you. You put those things together, all of which reinforce or don't each other, and you've got politics, and you've got the element of politics. So yes, call it whatever you want, but if you're aiming to build influence and your power and relationships that will support you and your team, and the perceptions and managing those, you're playing politics.
So one of the things that I found really fascinating, and you write about it, is the 4 types of political player. And I don't know whether you can just give us a very quick overview of those 4 caricatures of the political player, because I think we've all met some of them, and I found them quite sort of, liberating when you realise that these are kind of characters that everybody comes across.
Yes. So I say in the book something that I remember from one of my lecturers at university, and he said, look, all models are wrong because they're reductive. Some are just useful. So this is a reductive model, but I do think it's useful. And it's essentially 2 axes. And on the one axis, it's about the kind of influence that you have. So if you have a high degree of influence or a low degree of influence, and then if you have a high position or a low position. So if you can picture in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you've got a low position and you've got a low degree of influence, because position and influence don't necessarily correlate with each other. But low position and low influence, well, then you're a weakling. Not a weakling as a human being, let's be really clear about that, but just a weakling from a political point of view, because you don't have the relationships and influence and perceptions and power. If you have a low position, but actually you've got a lot of influence, and the classic example here is personal assistants. I mean, most people know, don't get on the wrong side of PAs. Your life will become very difficult in organizations and you won't understand why. Well, then they're a persuader. Other kinds of persuaders are people who've got a deep institutional knowledge. If then you've got a high position, but actually very little influence, so, the business card is incredibly impressive, but actually you're wandering around the corridors and people are just waiting for you to retire, well, then you're an empty suit. And if you've got both a high position and a high level of influence, well, then you really are a power player. You can set the tone, not just necessarily across an entire organization, but within departments and teams and in sub-parts of the organization as well. So those are the 4 types. And then there's also 4 types of power players. And that's where you either, it's about your behavior. So is your behavior helping yourself or helping the organization, or both? And in this model, if your behavior is not helping yourself or the organization, and of course it's not about your intentions, I can't see your intentions, I can only see your behavior. If your behavior is not helping you or the organization, well, then you're a dimwit. You can probably come up with words that are a little bit stronger than dimwit, but let's go with dimwit for the moment. If your behavior is all about the organization and really what matters to you in this life and in your career is completely on the back burner, well, then you're a martyr. And of course, you have every right to choose to be a martyr, but know that you are being a martyr. If your behavior is all about you, and really, you couldn't give a flying toss about anybody else in the team or the organization, well, then you're a sociopath. And then ideally, you're again sitting in the sweet spot where your behavior is both benefiting you and what you want in your career and the goals that you want in life and the organization. And then you're a winner. And it's easy to put people into quadrants. None of us are ever one thing. Different situations, different triggers can bring out different things in us, for better or for worse. So we can all move between these quadrants, but it's useful to just assess, particularly in the situation that you're currently finding yourself in, which one am I showing up as more often, and how is it helping me? How is it hindering me?
Yeah, you really resonate in that, whenever I've trusted my personal assistant, I know that she will have made up her mind about anybody she brings up from reception, and may yet whisper in my ear, what a lovely person, or something else. Like that quick. It's amazing, isn't it? But people can have such influence without necessarily being the boss.
Absolutely.
And I think they were inevitably right, when they used to whisper that quick assumption. So yeah, it's quite amazing. Now, one thing you said that I really loved and I'd never thought of before, and I hope you talk about it. And I think, I was really blown away by one of your stories, which is, a time when, you were preparing some work to be presented to Nelson Mandela, who we all hold in great esteem. But the thing that I really want you to talk about is the need for someone in the room for you, and the idea of you can influence when you're not in the room, but if you're not in the room, people have to know your work and what you stand for. And there's an amazing kind of whole array of ideas in there, which I think are really eye-opening and important. Can you talk to those? I know it's quite a big agenda, but really fascinating.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I say in my lectures that really gets people's attention, and when we were still doing in-person lectures, I could visibly see body language change as this landed, is some advice that I was given years ago, which was some of the most important decisions of your career are going to be made when you are not in the room. So who is in the room for you? And what are they saying? And, that's not something that's disappeared in COVID and remote working. In fact, it's become even more important. So that, I think, is just such a critical piece of advice. And it speaks to those things of politics, the influence, the relationships, the perceptions, and the power, and what people are saying when you're not around. And to speak to the story that you mentioned, yeah, it was one of the first stories in my career, and it had such a profound impact on me. So I was working for a strategy consulting firm. It was 1998, so Nelson Mandela was still president. And there was a very different energy, I think, not just in South Africa, but in the world, around possibility and reinventing all manner of things. And so as part of this project, it was a 20-year strategy that had to be developed for a particular government department. For 18 months, experts from all over the world, not just our consulting firm, but another consulting firm, came and really rigorously, with an enormous amount of expertise, looked through what the best strategic options would be. And, strategy is all about trade-offs and the things you choose not to do, leaving you with the things that you do. Anyway, so this had all been done, and endless iteration with stakeholders. The final report then gets presented to Nelson Mandela and the cabinet. And at the end, I say to the case team leader who'd been running the project for 18 months, gosh, aren't you excited? They really took that well. And don't you think that this is just the best solution? And I can really see how it's going to position South Africa for the future and position us really successfully. To which he very wisely responded, and I've had to think about it for years ever since. Niven, the gap between the objective best answer, which is the answer that we've just given with all of the analysis done, the gap between that and what will actually happen, that's about power and politics. And that happens behind closed doors, that happens without the consultants in the room. And let's see who's got vested interests and who has the power to make those vested interests stick. And that may accord with the rational best solution, but it probably won't. And he was absolutely right. And it's no reflection on the government, it's no reflection on South Africa, it's a reflection on the nature of power and politics. And it happens everywhere.
So that's a really wise and eye-opening story. Incredible. Now, questions. I didn't give you any advance notice, guys, about the questions, but Becky, are we ready to start asking those questions, or shall I ask Niven? Oh no, here we go. How do we manage office politics during the pandemic? Wow.
Yeah. So I have some tips because about 3 days after our lockdown was finished, I went to a Pilates class, so our hard lockdown, and I was talking to this new instructor about what I do, and he said, yeah, but surely office politics don't play a role in a remote working environment. And I said, actually, big mistake. Like Julia Roberts said in Pretty Women, big mistake. They do. So how you manage them is the same way you manage them in real life and when we're in physical contact with each other. The first is to understand what politics are. So to understand that they're not just these negative things that you've got to run a mile away from. The second thing is to understand how critical they are to your career. And there are tons of research papers that I can show you that say, look, the single biggest determinant of your career success is not going to be your technical ability, your sparkling personality. It's going to be your political savvy. And the third is then to realize that in a time when we are working remotely, then even more so, these issues of influence and perception and power and relationships are not things that can fall by the wayside. They're actually things that even more so you've got to invest in. You have to manage your brand. You have to manage your delivery. And so, all too often people make the mistake, and they make the mistake even more so now in the pandemic, of thinking, well, my work will speak for itself. So if I just get on with the job and I deliver what I need to, that's enough. And second of all, people are thinking, well, in between all the drama and the turmoil that the pandemic's causing, there's also this degree of excitement and liberation, right? I mean, I don't have to commute. I don't have to get dressed in anything from the waist down. And I don't have to deal with office politics. Those are both big, big mistakes. These interpersonal skills, the delivery of work beyond just your technical stuff is absolutely critical now. So the third way to deal with it is to not make the mistake of thinking that it's purely the technical output that matters. It's never only been the technical output that's mattered. It's always been about the relationships as well. So how do you understand that and nurture that and invest in that as much as you're investing in the technical output and the actual, in inverted commas, job that you're doing?
Oh, yes. I could relay some stories too, but that's very wise. Okay, we have from Anne-Marie, how do you get better at politics and know when to engage in the tactics?
Yeah. So lovely question, Anne-Marie. So I always think about that it goes in 3 stages, right? So the first is the awareness, which I've shared with you already. So what are we talking about when we're talking about politics? And it's, like I said, the informal, unofficial, behind the scenes efforts that we all engage in. Understand that and understand you're never going to escape politics. It doesn't matter which organization or country that you're in. So the moment you understand what they are, the moment you understand how important they are, and the moment you understand that you're not going to escape them, well, you're already way further than most people for whom none of those things are true. And then understand that it's all about what you're trying to achieve. And so if you go onto my website, there are a whole bunch of assessments that you can download. So once you've got the awareness, some of which I've shared now, then start to assess yourself against some of the dimensions that would make you successful or not. So how much leverage do you have? What kind of network do you have? Do you have all the allies that you need on your side to get things done? Do you have more adversaries than allies, in which case you're probably heading for trouble? So once you've assessed yourself, well, then it's starting to take action. And again, if you go to the website, you can get this workbook for free. It's about crafting a political strategy and saying, as with any strategy, what am I trying to achieve and what's it going to take to get there? What's it going to take in terms of all the dimensions that I need to bring? And it can sound, hugely complex and overwhelming. It's actually not. It's quite systematic, the questions that I ask you. And it's quite systematic then, the options that are open to you. And then it's about a lifelong skill of practicing this. But like I say, hopefully knowing what it is, knowing how important it is, knowing where you stand relative to where you want to be, well, then you have the energy and the inclination to practice these skills for the rest of your career.
Well, I think that's wonderful that you can share that with us, and I know that we'll put on the website later and share across social the links so that people can get that wisdom and guidance from you. That's fantastic. Here we are. Melissa, how can you change a negative dynamic office political game to a positive dynamic? Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question, Melissa. So one of the points that I repeatedly make is, and I've made it already, you're not going to escape politics. Don't try to. That said, politics does exist on a spectrum, right? And minimally, moderately, highly politicized environments are all ones that you can navigate and manage. And I've worked in all three kinds of environments. The fourth kind of environment is a toxic environment, a pathologically politicized environment. And so, Melissa, I don't know from your question how negative is. But what I always say, and I get very serious, and some of the stories that I've heard have been incredibly moving at this point in lectures or workshops, is if you are in a truly toxic environment, one that is, quite frankly, abusive and destructive, and I have been in one of those environments in my career. And when I say toxic and destructive, I'm talking about somebody who, a colleague of mine had 3 heart attacks, and she was a fit woman who ran marathons, had 3 heart attacks in the space of 18 months because of what this person was making happen in the environment. Another colleague had a stroke immediately after having a meeting with this manager. That's what I'm talking about with toxic. If it's that bad, and in my situation, when it was that bad, I tried everything. I went to a coach. I can't change the situation. I can only change myself. I went to the CEO 3 times to say what was going on. Eventually, the only solution for me was to leave. And for years afterwards, I thought about that and I thought, gosh, did I not try hard enough? Did I not? Was there something I could have done differently? Or if I'd just given one more shot at it, it would have shifted things. And actually, in all the research that I've done in office politics, my advice and my experience is the advice that's given in research, which is 3 words: get out now. Run like hell. So if it's a truly toxic environment, that's the only option. If it's something a little bit less enjoyable, but still functional, well, then you've got to get a sense of, look, what's causing it to be negative? And again, there's assessments in the workbook. And you can get a sense of, am I verging towards a toxic environment, in which case get out? Or are there just things here that, it's not such a great day at work, it's not such a great team, but there are levers that I can pull to make it more positive.
Well, that's a really quite a big and quite common problem that I've heard of, and it always upsets me when I hear that question, because you have to protect yourself, don't you? You are the valuable entity that does need that protection. So, does emotional intelligence play a role in office politics? Well, nice.
Yeah, this question comes up every so often, and the idea of the link between EQ, culture, office politics. I mean, they are all kind of interconnected. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Daniel Goleman's work on EQ, again, it's a 2x2 matrix, right? And it's about emotions, yours and others. And so with EQ, you have the ability to, first of all, recognize, and then second of all, regulate your emotions and other people's emotions. And so because so much of politics is dependent on your relationships with people and the social capital that having the right people in your corner can give you, emotional intelligence can play a huge role in that. But office politics and getting skilled at politics is more than just emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, like I say, is a recognition and a regulation of dynamics. But office politics requires that you go beyond just the recognition and the regulation to actually investing in the skills and the stakeholders and the allies and the people that you need on your side. So it's a constant thing rather than just an evaluation that emotional intelligence can give you.
Great. And I think this is probably going to be our last question. How do you cultivate a winner mindset to navigate office politics? Winner mindset.
Yeah. Well, again, the first thing is to understand what you're talking about, what we're talking about. Understand how critical politics are to you. And there's a fantastic book, which I did some research from when I was preparing my lectures a few years ago. And the title of the book by Kathleen Kelly Reardon in the States is It's All Politics. And then the subtitle is Winning in a World Where Talent and Hard Work Are Not Enough. And often when I say this, I can see especially youngsters who are just starting out in their career getting very frustrated, saying, no, but it should be enough. And my work should speak for itself. And then I just, say to them, the reality is, in an ideal world, maybe it would, but we're not living in an ideal world. In this world, you need to manage perceptions. People need to know about the work that you're doing. And so for me, it's about, again, if you understand the potential, if you understand the risk in not getting engaged in office politics to you, to your career, to your team, if you understand that it's perfectly possible to do it and hold on to your integrity, well, that's the first start. And then it's about, okay, so how do I approach this situation? How do I approach these stakeholders? How do I invest some effort into this? And a delegate in one of my lectures said once, when I was talking about some of the skills that you need and that you need to practice and constantly develop, she looked quite exhausted and she said, oh, gosh, it's a lot of work. I said, it is work. Of course it's work. But it's not a distraction from your work. It is the work that will make your work more successful and make your work a lot easier.
Yeah, well, lifelong learning, hard work, these are the things that we hear. And, you've added perception is reality. And that is a very important truth. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Niven. Please show your book, because mine didn't come in time, but please do show your book, because I'm getting it. And I think, some people out there will want to go online and perhaps grab that. So thank you. And thank you so much for sharing, what is a very fantastic career and a lot of experiences in this field. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Niven. And thank you to everybody out there. If I can just mention, our next LinkedIn Live is on the 12th of November, which is next week, and is with Dr. Mary at Rise Up For You. And she's going to talk to us about how to promote healthy conflict resolution. So I hope you'll join us for that. And in the meantime, once again, Niven, thank you very much.
Thank you. And gosh, that half hour went quickly.
Too quickly.